The air hung thick with the metallic tang of iron as I stared at the wreckage. Years of research, millions in funding, all reduced to this, glitter-dusted biohazard signs and the faint scent of lilies masking something far more sinister. They had danced on my dreams, celebrated amongst my life's work, desecrated everything I held sacred. They thought because I was quiet, I was defeated. They were wrong. If your sister is your best friend, subscribe now. My name is Caroline, and for years, I poured my heart and soul into building a state-of-the-art research lab. Not just any lab, but one dedicated to understanding some of the most complex biological threats facing humanity. It was my sanctuary, my obsession, a place where sterile white walls housed cutting-edge technology and the promise of groundbreaking discoveries. The funding was substantial, a cool $1.5 million secured through grants and government contracts, all meticulously managed and accounted for. Every piece of equipment, every vial, every protocol was subject to rigorous oversight. It was stressful, demanding, but also incredibly rewarding. I thrived in the challenge, pushing the boundaries of science, driven by a deep-seated desire to make a difference. My sister, Emily, always admired my work. Or so I thought. She would visit occasionally, marveling at the intricate machinery and the complex experiments I was conducting. She'd ask questions, seemingly genuinely interested, and I, in my naivete, would happily explain everything, never suspecting the darkness brewing beneath her charming smile. Life outside the lab was simple. I had a small circle of friends, colleagues mostly, and a comfortable routine. Weekends were often spent catching up on paperwork or running additional experiments. Taking time off felt like a luxury I couldn't afford. The lab was my life, and I guarded it fiercely. The security protocols were stringent, access limited to authorized personnel only. Biohazard protocols were strictly enforced. Emily knew all of this. Or at least, she pretended to respect it. Then came the invitation to our cousin's wedding. A destination affair in the Bahamas, something I initially declined. The lab, the research, the looming deadlines, they all screamed for my attention. But Emily, ever persuasive, insisted. "Caroline, you work too hard," she'd said, her voice laced with concern. "You need a break. Come on, it'll be fun. Family time." Eventually, I relented, swayed by her insistence and the nagging feeling that I was neglecting my personal life. I booked a flight, arranged for a colleague to oversee the most critical experiments, and packed my bags, looking forward to a few days of sun, sand, and maybe even a little relaxation. The wedding was exactly as expected, extravagant, overflowing with champagne, and filled with relatives I hadn't seen in years. I smiled, made small talk, and tried to enjoy myself, but a part of me was always thinking about the lab, wondering if everything was running smoothly. I called my colleague daily, checking in, reassured by his calm and confident reports. What I didn't know was the magnitude of what awaited my return. As soon as my taxi pulled up to the familiar building, I sensed something was horribly wrong. There were cars parked all over the place. Music, not the sterile hum of equipment, throbbed through the walls. The front door, usually secured with multiple locks and a keycard system, was wide open. I stepped inside. The lab had been transformed. Fairy lights twinkled from the ceiling, draped over the biosafety cabinets. Tables laden with floral arrangements and half-eaten appetizers filled the space where sensitive equipment once stood. Guests, dressed in cocktail attire, milled about, laughing and chatting, oblivious to the potential danger surrounding them. And there, in the center of it all, was Emily, resplendent in a bridesmaid dress, beaming with pride. "Surprise!" she shrieked, rushing to embrace me. "Isn't it amazing? I knew you'd love it." "Love it?" I was horrified. My lab, my sanctuary, had been turned into a wedding venue. But the true horror was only beginning to dawn. As I pushed my way through the crowd, trying to assess the damage, I noticed things that made my blood run cold. Equipment was unplugged, vials were misplaced, and the air felt different. There was a strange, sweet scent mingling with the perfume and cologne of the guests, an aroma that sent shivers down my spine. And then I saw it, a small, unlabeled vial lying on the floor, its contents spilled across the pristine white tiles. It was one of the most dangerous pathogens I was working with, a highly contagious virus with potentially devastating consequences. My mind raced, trying to comprehend the full scope of the disaster. The biohazard protocols, the safety measures, the years of painstaking work, all compromised in a single, reckless act. The realization hit me like a physical blow. This wasn't just a party gone wrong. This was a catastrophic breach of security, a violation of federal regulations, and a potential threat to public health. And Emily, my own sister, was responsible. The person I trusted most was one of them. The world swam. My carefully constructed reality fractured in a million pieces. I grabbed Emily's arm, pulling her away from the throng of oblivious revelers. My voice, when it finally emerged, was a strained whisper. "What have you done?" Her smile faltered, replaced by a flicker of something I couldn't quite decipher. Was it guilt, defiance, or something far more sinister? "It's just a party, Caroline. Relax. You're always so uptight." "A party?" I repeated, my voice rising despite my efforts to remain calm. "This is a biohazard lab, Emily. Do you have any idea what could happen?" I gestured frantically at the spilled vial, the misplaced equipment, the sheer chaos of the scene. "This isn't just about me, it's about everyone here, maybe even the whole community." Her eyes narrowed. "Oh, don't be so dramatic. It's not like anyone's going to get sick. Besides," she added with a dismissive wave of her hand, "it's done now. Just try to enjoy yourself." Enjoy myself? The audacity was breathtaking. As the initial shock began to wear off, a cold, simmering rage began to take its place. I had dedicated years of my life to this work, sacrificed everything for the sake of scientific progress and the potential to save lives. And she, in a single act of thoughtless selfishness, had jeopardized it all. I told everyone to get out. Now. I yelled, loud enough to cut through the music. People stared, confused and annoyed. Emily tried to stop me. "Caroline, what are you doing? You're embarrassing me." But I pushed past her, my focus solely on clearing the lab. I didn't explain, didn't apologize. I simply pointed to the door and repeated, "Get out. Now." Slowly, reluctantly, the guests, once the last of them had gone, I turned to Emily, my voice low and dangerous. "You need to tell me everything. Who helped you? What did you move? What did you touch?" She folded her arms, her expression defiant. "I don't know what you're talking about." I grabbed her arm again, my grip tightening. "Don't play dumb with me, Emily. This isn't a game. People could get sick, people could unalive. Now tell me the truth." Finally, her facade crumbled. Tears welled up in her eyes. Okay, she sobbed. "It was just supposed to be a small party. I didn't think it would be such a big deal." She explained that she had been feeling overlooked, overshadowed by my success. She wanted to do something special for me, to surprise me and show me how much she cared. But somehow, the small party had spiraled out of control, fueled by alcohol and the excitement of doing something forbidden. As she spoke, I felt a strange mixture of anger and disbelief. How could she be so reckless, so irresponsible? Did she not understand the gravity of her actions? She told me that Mark, her fiancé, had helped her get access. He worked in facilities maintenance and knew the security codes. He had disabled the alarms and helped her move the equipment. My blood ran cold. This was worse than I had imagined. It wasn't just a spontaneous act of carelessness, it was a calculated, premeditated violation. I spent the next several hours trying to salvage the situation. I called my colleague, explained what had happened, and begged him to come back to the lab immediately. Together, we worked tirelessly, decontaminating surfaces, inventorying samples, and trying to assess the extent of the damage. It was a Sisyphean task, made all the more difficult by the lingering scent of lilies and the faint shimmer of glitter dust clinging to every surface. Sleep was a forgotten luxury. I existed on caffeine and adrenaline, driven by a desperate need to contain the damage and prevent a potential outbreak. The next morning, I contacted the authorities, reporting the security breach and the potential biohazard exposure. The response was swift and severe. Federal agents descended upon the lab, launching a full-scale investigation. They interviewed me, my colleague, Emily, and Mark, meticulously documenting every detail of the incident. The lab was shut down, my research suspended, and my reputation tarnished. I felt like I was drowning, the weight of the world pressing down on me. The media got wind of the story, and soon my name and face were plastered across every newspaper and television screen. I was branded as irresponsible, reckless, and a danger to public health. The funding dried up, my grants were revoked, and my career was effectively over. Emily, meanwhile, seemed to fade into the background, avoiding my calls and shifting the blame onto Mark. He was fired from his job and faced potential criminal charges. Our family was torn apart, divided by anger, resentment, and a deep sense of betrayal. I found myself isolated, alone, and consumed by a burning desire for justice. They had taken everything from me, my work, my reputation, my peace of mind. And they seemed to be getting away with it. I spent weeks and days, haunted by nightmares of swirling viruses and glittering biohazard signs. I couldn't eat, couldn't sleep, couldn't shake the feeling that I was suffocating. The weight of the injustice was crushing me. But beneath the despair, a spark of defiance began to flicker. I refused to let them win. I refused to let their actions define me. I would find a way to reclaim what they had stolen from me. I would make them pay. The first step was to understand exactly what had happened, to uncover the full extent of their betrayal. And for that, I needed a plan. The silence in my apartment was deafening, broken only by the rhythmic drip of a leaky faucet, a constant reminder of the chaos that had consumed my life. Each drop echoed the loss of funding, the death of my professional dreams, the chasm that had grown between me and my family. I stared blankly at the television screen, images flashing before me, each one a distorted reflection of my reality. A news anchor spoke of the potential health crisis, flashing images of the contaminated lab, my lab, across the screen. The comments section online was a cesspool of hate, accusations, and threats. I felt like a pariah, marked and judged by a world that didn't understand the truth. Sleep offered no escape. Nightmares plagued me, vivid replays of the party, the spilled vial, Emily's vacant smile. I would wake up in a cold sweat, my heart pounding, gasping for air as if I were drowning. During the day, I couldn't bring myself to leave the apartment. The thought of facing the world, the stares, the whispers, was unbearable. I closed the blinds, shutting out the sunlight, and retreated into the darkness. I ordered takeout, barely picking at the food, the flavors tasting like ash in my mouth. Days bled into weeks, and I slowly began to lose track of time. The once organized apartment became a reflection of my inner turmoil, cluttered with unwashed dishes, discarded clothes, and stacks of unopened mail. I had stopped showering, stopped brushing my hair, stopped caring. I was a shell of my former self, hollowed out by grief, betrayal, and despair. One evening, I found myself staring at a bottle of pills. It was an old prescription for anxiety, something I had used sparingly during particularly stressful periods in the lab. The label was faded, the expiration date long past. But in that moment, it seemed like the only solution, the only way to quiet the voices in my head, to escape the pain. I held the bottle in my hand, weighing the decision, the weight of it pressing down on me like a physical burden. The pills promised oblivion, a release from the torment, a way out. I opened the bottle, the plastic lid snapping like a gunshot in the silent room. As I stared at the small white pills in my palm, a single image flashed through my mind, my lab. Not the chaotic party scene, but the early days, the clean, sterile environment filled with the promise of discovery. I remembered the long hours, the dedication, the unwavering belief in the importance of my work. I remembered the faces of the people I had hoped to help, the potential to make a difference in the world. And I realized that if I gave up, if I gave in to the despair, I would be letting them win. Emily, Mark, the faceless voices online, they would have succeeded in destroying everything I had worked for. A wave of anger surged through me, stronger than the despair, sharper than the pain. It was a primal, visceral rage, a refusal to be defeated. My vision blurred. The glass in my hand shattered, shards scattering across the floor, mirroring the shattered pieces of my life. The sharp sting of the shards cutting into my skin shocked me back to reality. I stared at the crimson welling up in my palm, the pain a tangible reminder that I was still alive, still capable of fighting. With trembling hands, I gathered the broken glass, carefully wrapping it in a paper towel. I cleaned the wound, bandaging it tightly, each action a small act of defiance. Then, I stood up, my legs shaky, my body weak, but my resolve hardened. The pills remained untouched on the table. I walked to the window and yanked open the blinds, letting the sunlight flood into the apartment. The sudden brightness was jarring, but I welcomed it, embraced it as a symbol of hope. The darkness had consumed me for too long. It was time to fight back. The first step was information. I needed to understand exactly how Emily and Mark had managed to pull off their scheme, who else might have been involved, and what their motivations were. I started by meticulously reviewing every email, every text message, every phone record from the weeks leading up to the party. I spent hours poring over security footage from the lab, searching for clues, for any indication of their planning. It was tedious, painstaking work, but I was driven by a relentless determination. As I sifted through the digital debris, I began to uncover a web of lies and deceit. I discovered that Mark had been in contact with several disgruntled former employees of the lab, individuals who had been fired for incompetence or disciplinary reasons. They seemed to have a shared grievance against me, a belief that I had treated them unfairly. Could they have been involved in the planning of the party, providing Mark with inside information or access codes? The thought sent a chill down my spine. And then there was Emily. As I reviewed her text messages, I noticed a pattern of communication with a number I didn't recognize. The messages were cryptic, often using coded language, but they hinted at a deeper involvement in the scheme than she had admitted. I traced the number to a burner phone purchased under a false name. Who was Emily talking to? What were they planning? The more I dug, the more I realized that this wasn't just a simple act of sibling rivalry or a misguided attempt to throw a surprise party. This was something far more complex, far more sinister. Someone was pulling the strings, orchestrating the entire event, and I needed to find out who it was. The spark of defiance had ignited a fire, a burning desire for justice that consumed me. I would uncover the truth, no matter the cost. They thought they had broken me, silenced me, destroyed me. But they were wrong. The game had just begun. The burner phone became my obsession. I had to know who Emily was talking to, what secrets she was hiding. I contacted an old acquaintance from college, someone who worked in digital forensics. I explained the situation, careful to omit the most sensitive details, and asked for their help in tracing the phone. They were hesitant at first, citing legal and ethical concerns, but eventually agreed to take a look, driven by a mix of curiosity and a desire to help a friend in need. A few days later, they called me back with a name, Julian Vance. The name meant nothing to me. My acquaintance was able to dig up some basic information about Vance. He was a local businessman, involved in several real estate ventures, and had a reputation for being ruthless and ambitious. He also had a history of shady dealings and had been investigated for fraud on multiple occasions, although he had never been formally charged. I searched for any connection between Vance, Emily, and the lab, but came up empty. It was as if he existed in a completely separate world, untouched by the chaos that had engulfed my life. I felt a growing sense of unease. Why would Emily, my seemingly innocent sister, be communicating with someone like Julian Vance? What could they possibly have in common? I decided to dig deeper into Vance's background, hoping to find a clue, a connection, anything that would explain his involvement. I spent hours scouring public records, news articles, and social media, piecing together a fragmented picture of his life. I learned that he was a major donor to several political campaigns, had close ties to local law enforcement, and seemed to have a network of influence that extended throughout the city. The more I learned, the more I realized that then I found it. Buried deep in an obscure financial report, I discovered that Vance's company had recently made a substantial investment in a pharmaceutical company that was developing a competing treatment for the virus I had been studying in my lab. A treatment that, if successful, could be worth billions of dollars. The pieces began to fall into place. Vance wasn't just trying to sabotage my research, he was trying to eliminate the competition. He had used Emily, manipulated her insecurities and her desire for attention, to gain access to the lab and destroy my work. And he had used Mark, promising him a better future, to carry out his plan. I felt a surge of anger, so intense that it made me tremble. They had not only ruined my life, they had endangered public health, all for the sake of greed and profit. I knew that I couldn't go to the authorities with this information. Vance was too powerful, too well connected. He would simply deny the allegations, use his influence to discredit me, and bury the evidence. I had to find a way to expose him, to reveal the truth to the world, without putting myself in danger. I smiled grimly. It was time to play their game, but with my own rules. I reached out to Emily, pretending that I was ready to forgive her, to move on from the past. She was hesitant at first, but eventually agreed to meet me for coffee. I arrived at the cafe early, planting several hidden cameras around the table, ensuring that every word, every gesture would be recorded. When Emily arrived, she seemed nervous, avoiding eye contact and fidgeting with her hands. I played the role of the concerned sister, expressing my forgiveness and my desire to rebuild our relationship. Slowly, she began to relax, and the conversation turned to the party, to Mark, to the events that had led to the lab shutdown. I subtly steered the conversation towards Vance, asking seemingly innocent questions about his involvement, his motivations. And as she spoke, I carefully guided her, prompting her to reveal more and more details, each word adding to the damning evidence I was collecting. The entire conversation was like walking on a tightrope. One wrong step, one misplaced word, and the whole thing would fall apart. But I managed to maintain my composure, to keep Emily talking, to extract the information I needed. By the end of the meeting, I had a confession, a detailed account of Vance's involvement, his manipulation, and his ultimate goal, to destroy my research and profit from the competing treatment. I had recorded everything, every word, every nuance, every lie. Now, I needed to find a way to get the information to the right people, to expose Vance's crimes to the world. But I couldn't just release the recording publicly. Vance would deny it, claim it was fabricated, and use his influence to silence me. I needed something more, something irrefutable, something that would leave no room for doubt. I remembered something Mark had mentioned during his initial interview with the authorities, that Vance had kept detailed records of his illegal activities, stored on a secure server in his office. If I could access that server, I could find the evidence I needed to bring him down. But breaking into Vance's office was a risky proposition. He had a state-of-the-art security system, armed guards, and a reputation for being ruthless. I needed a plan, a strategy that would allow me to bypass his defenses and access the server without getting caught. I spent weeks studying Vance's office building, analyzing the security protocols, and identifying potential weaknesses. I learned the schedules of the guards, my acquaintance in forensics helped me again, outlining the server security, its firewalls, and the types of data encryption Vance's team likely used. I spent countless hours honing my skills, learning about hacking techniques, data encryption, and network security. I practiced on virtual servers, simulating different scenarios, and refining my approach. The risk felt electric. The date was set. The night was coming. I rehearsed the plan in my head, visualizing every step, every contingency. I knew that the odds were stacked against me, but I was driven by a burning desire for justice, a refusal to let Vance get away with his crimes. I will erase what he has done. The day they tried to end me was the day revenge was born. The night of the break-in arrived cloaked in a thick fog, the perfect cover for my operation. I dressed in black, my movements precise and deliberate. I felt a strange mix of fear and exhilaration, the adrenaline coursing through my veins. As I approached Vance's office building, I surveyed the scene, noting the positions of the security cameras and the patrol routes of the guards. I found a blind spot near the loading dock, a narrow alleyway obscured by shadows. It was my entry point. Using a lockpicking kit I had acquired online, I silently disabled the door lock, slipping inside the building unnoticed. The interior was dimly lit, the only sound the hum of the ventilation system. I navigated the corridors with practiced ease, relying on the blueprints I had memorized. I bypassed motion sensors using a combination of stealth and technical skill, moving like a ghost through the shadows. I reached the server room, a heavily fortified chamber protected by a keypad lock and a biometric scanner. This was the most challenging part of the operation. I pulled out a small device from my bag, a custom-built hacking tool designed to bypass the security systems. I connected it to the keypad, initiating a brute force attack, cycling through thousands of possible combinations. Time seemed to slow to a crawl as I waited, my heart pounding in my chest. Finally, the keypad flashed green, granting me access. I disabled the biometric scanner using a spoofing program, fooling the system into recognizing my fingerprint. The door hissed open, revealing the server room, a cold, sterile space filled with rows of humming computers. I located Vance's server, a powerful machine tucked away in the corner of the room. I connected my laptop to the server, initiating a data transfer, bypassing the firewalls with a sophisticated exploit. The data began to flow, downloading Vance's files onto my laptop, revealing his secrets, his lies, his crimes. As the download progressed, I noticed something strange, a hidden directory, labeled with a cryptic code. Curiosity piqued, I opened the directory, revealing a series of encrypted files. I recognized the encryption algorithm. It was a military-grade encryption, virtually unbreakable. But I had anticipated this. I had spent weeks developing a decryption key, a mathematical algorithm that could crack the code. I initiated the decryption process, a lengthy and computationally intensive task. As the files decrypted, I began to see the contents, financial records, emails, and documents detailing Vance's illegal activities, his dealings with Emily and Mark, and his plans to sabotage my research. The evidence was overwhelming, irrefutable. But there was something else, something even more shocking, a series of video files, labeled with dates and times. I opened one of the files, and my blood ran cold. It was a recording of a meeting between Vance, Emily, and Mark, discussing the details of the party, the vial, and the plan to discredit me. But there was another person in the room, someone I didn't recognize. A man in a dark suit, his face obscured by shadows. As the video progressed, the man began to speak, his voice low and menacing. He revealed himself as a representative of a powerful pharmaceutical company, the one that stood to profit from the failure of my research. He offered Vance a substantial sum of money in exchange for eliminating the competition, ensuring that their treatment would be the only option available. The man's face remained hidden, but his voice was unmistakable. I recognized it instantly. It was my father. The revelation hit me like a physical blow, shattering my world, turning everything I thought I knew upside down. My own father had betrayed me, had conspired with Vance to destroy my life, all for the sake of profit and greed. The pain was unbearable, a searing agony that consumed me. But amidst the pain, a new emotion emerged, a cold, unwavering resolve. I would expose them all, Vance, Emily, Mark, and my own father. I would make them pay for what they had done. I finished downloading the files, securing the evidence, and disconnecting my laptop from the server. I carefully erased my tracks, covering my digital footprints, and restoring the security systems to their original state. I slipped out of the server room, retracing my steps through the building, avoiding the cameras and the guards. I exited the building through the loading dock, disappearing into the fog-shrouded night. Back in my apartment, I reviewed the evidence, preparing to release it to the world. But I knew that simply publishing the files wouldn't be enough. Vance and my father would deny the allegations, use their influence to discredit me, and bury the evidence. I needed a plan, a strategy that would guarantee their downfall. I decided to set a trap, a carefully orchestrated scheme that would expose their crimes to the world, leaving them with no escape. I crafted an anonymous email, sending it to several news organizations, whistleblower websites, and law enforcement agencies. The email contained a summary of the evidence, along with a link to a secure file-sharing site where the files could be downloaded. But I didn't release the files immediately. I wanted to give Vance and my father. I knew that they would try to cover up their tracks, to silence me, to destroy the evidence. And that's exactly what I wanted them to do. I monitored their communications, tracking their movements, and recording their conversations. I watched as they scrambled to contain the damage, contacting lawyers, public relations firms, and even private investigators. They were desperate, panicked, and making mistakes. I allowed them to believe that they were in control, that they could suppress the truth. But I was always one step ahead, anticipating their moves, and preparing my counterstrike. The game was reaching its climax. I knew that they would eventually try to come after me, to silence me permanently. And I was ready for them. I set up a false trail, leading them away from my apartment, towards a remote location on the outskirts of the city. I wanted them to think that I was vulnerable, that I was within their grasp. But it was all a ruse, a carefully crafted trap. I waited, patiently, for them to take the bait. They thought they were untouchable. They thought they were above the law. But they were wrong. The exact day they tried to end me, I exposed the truth. The trap was set. They took the bait. I watched from a distance, using surveillance equipment I had planted near the remote location. Vance and a group of his thugs arrived first, their faces grim, their eyes scanning the surroundings. Moments later, a separate car pulled up, carrying my father and a couple of his associates. They met in the middle of the clearing, exchanging tense words, their body language radiating suspicion and distrust. I activated the hidden speakers, broadcasting the recording of their meeting in Vance's office, the one where they discussed the plan to sabotage my research and eliminate me. The recording echoed through the clearing, their voices clear and unmistakable, their treachery laid bare for all to hear. Their faces paled as they recognized their own words, their eyes widening in disbelief and horror. Vance turned to my father, his expression one of betrayal and rage. My father tried to deny it, to claim it was a fabrication, but the evidence was overwhelming, undeniable. A fight erupted, a chaotic brawl fueled by years of resentment and greed. Vance's thugs attacked my father's associates, fists flying, insults hurled. I watched as their carefully constructed alliance crumbled before my eyes, their ambition reduced to a petty squabble in the dirt. As the fight raged on, I triggered the next phase of my plan. I released the files to the news organizations, whistleblower websites, and law enforcement agencies. The evidence flooded the internet, exposing Vance's crimes, my father's treachery, and Emily and Mark's involvement. The story went viral, spreading like wildfire across social media, dominating headlines, and igniting a firestorm of public outrage. The authorities launched investigations, raiding Vance's office, seizing his assets, and arresting him and his accomplices. My father was taken into custody, his reputation ruined, his legacy tarnished. Emily and Mark were exposed as co-conspirators, facing public scorn and legal repercussions. The fallout was swift and devastating. Vance's empire crumbled, his political influence vanished, his reputation shattered beyond repair. He was charged with fraud, conspiracy, and obstruction of justice, facing a long prison sentence. My father lost everything, his position, his wealth, his family. He was ostracized by his peers, condemned by the public, and abandoned by his friends. Emily and Mark's lives were irrevocably changed, their dreams shattered, their futures uncertain. They faced social isolation, career setbacks, and the constant reminder of their betrayal. I watched as their lives unraveled, their carefully constructed worlds collapsing around them. I saw the fear in their eyes, the despair on their faces, the realization that they had lost everything. They lost everything. I just smiled. In the aftermath, I emerged from the shadows, revealing my identity, and sharing my story with the world. I became a symbol of resilience, a beacon of hope for those who had been wronged. I used my platform to advocate for justice, to fight against corruption, and to empower others to stand up for themselves. I rebuilt my life, stronger and more determined than ever before. I established a foundation to support scientific research, to promote ethical business practices, and to protect whistleblowers. I dedicated my life to making a difference, to creating a world where justice prevails, and where no one is above the law. The crimson faded. The iron scent dissipated. I walked away from the wreckage, leaving behind the ashes of their destruction. I felt a sense of closure, a sense of peace, knowing that I had done what was necessary. Revenge isn't sweet. It's necessary. It's the universe recalibrating itself. Evening the score. Some may call it extreme. I call it justice. Would you have done the same? Let me know in the comments. Subscribe for more justice.